This is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022, 4:15 p.m. This is a special board meeting of the Ogdensburg Bridge and Port Authority. This meeting is called to order. I see we have no unfinished business. Is that right, Mr. Lawrence?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Under business items, I would like a motion to amend the agenda so that we do agenda item B under other such matters. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Thank you, Tony. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Agenda item B, other such matters. Ms. Terminelli, if you would like to speak to that, please.
Sure. What I've brought to the table is I would like to offer a resolution in opposition to Assembly Bill A7919 and Senate Bill S3908, the New York State Buy American Salt Act.
Thank you. Could you summarize that, please?
I'd be happy to. I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to bring this resolution forward to the board. On Monday night at a special board meeting, the St. Lawrence County Board of Legislators actually approved a resolution opposing these two, the Senate and Assembly bill as well. And because of my position on the board, I had to recuse myself from discussion and voting. So I'm taking the opportunity to bring it before the board now. This bill has passed both the Senate and the Assembly and is waiting to be signed into legislation by Governor Hochul. And it's our hopes that bringing it forward tonight, that we can send a copy of it and let her know how it affects us here at the Ogdensburg Bridge and Port Authority. This is a resolution or a bill that has been largely sponsored by Western New York representatives. And it's a push to have the procurement process for any kind of governmental contracts to be American salts only, which on surface value is a fantastic way to support our own economy here in the United States, and definitely has the ambition to support union jobs in the Western New York salt mines. There are two pretty large ones there. However, the passing of this legislation does not guarantee government procurement to get salt from New York State. It's still going to go through the process and end up with the lowest bidder, which could be in Pennsylvania or Ohio or who knows where else. We have bringing salt in through the port through Canada is a huge revenue stream for us here at Ogdensburg Bridge and Port Authority, as well as it provides living wage jobs to our ILA members. And as in support of our local community and our local unions, I feel the need to bring this and give voice to the North Country. Oftentimes when legislation passes over the desk in Albany, our version of how it affects us is not heard. So I just think it's really important that she understands that while this may have a positive impact in Western New York, it definitely is going to hurt the North Country, the union jobs that we have here, and other port cities along the coast.
Thank you. Is that a motion? Put that resolution in motion?
That is a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Been seconded. During discussion? Anyone? Well, I agree with you, Nicole, regarding this resolution. Again, I think I understand why. We all understand in multiple organizations and authorities over the past couple of years, Buy American has been a big push of ours. And here at the Bridge and Port Authority, just recently, we purchased equipment for the port that we knew it would cost us additional funds, but because it was Buy American, we did that. understanding what the ramifications of that are. However, in this case, you know, we're losing, we could lose American union jobs here at our port, and the spin-off income from those jobs up in northern New York, which to us is quite significant. And it's my belief, and I asked Mr. Lawrence to expand on this a little, that the salt we receive from the Canadian mines is better environmentally than others. Is that correct?
Yes, what we do is we do a value added with adding, we add a liquid that lowers the melting point. So we're kind of a depot that does value added to Canadian salt so that they can bid, the American companies that get Canadian salt can bid on salt requisitions and contracts up in the Adirondacks that allows them to use this product, and they use less of it. And so, you know, it's more environmentally friendly because you use less of it. It's more effective there. It's a better product when you're trying to reduce the amount of road salt, yet try to keep safety in mind with the highways. So that's something we've been doing for the last 3 years, and we've been actually increasing our stockpile of that and shipment of that. And it's been something we've been encouraging and working with a couple American companies to be able to sell their product in more environmentally sensitive areas.
Yeah, again, it's bits of information like that I don't think a lot of the state legislators know of. And I'm sure there's a lot of support across the state for that process that we do here for the areas within the Adirondack Park. And that's, again, we all know how important it is, those of us that remember the acid rain and the problems with the lakes up in the Adirondacks. And I believe Assemblyman Jones is part of a new group that's working to expand on that. So we certainly hope that he will join us in opposition to this. And again, even though it's passed, we know the governor has been open to different sides of any issue, and we hope she takes a serious look at this and considers what effect it has on not just the Bridge and Port Authority, but the North Country. Any other discussion? If not, Anne Marie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Coffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Whitten?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. We're back on the agenda item 3A, Port of Augsburg, acceptance of the 2021-22 audit. Mr. Lawrence or Patty, whoever.
Patty will introduce us to this and to the auditors.
You have before you the draft of the 2021-22 audit. And I would like to turn this over to it to go over it with us for a few moments and point out anything that he feels that the board should be made aware of. Kent, it's all yours.
Thanks, Patty. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the audit presentation for your year-end 3/31/22 financial statements. I assume that you all have the financial statements in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So just go through the items within the financial statements. So within the financial statements in the table of contents, we'll go through the auditor's report, just touch on the management's discussion and analysis of the basic financial statements, talk about the required supplementary information, and then there are 2 reports at the end that involve the single audit. So one thing to note here, the management's discussion and analysis is a required part of governmental accounting standards. So they're a required part of the GASB statements. On page 1, you're going to see that's where the independent auditor's report is. If you compare this auditor's report to last year's financial statements, you'll see that there's a little bit of change in this year's. The intention here was to move the opinion to the front of the financial statements. That is prescribed to us by the AICPA. And so you'll see that change there. So it takes the most important information and puts it right on the front page. There's some other information that kind of expands on the auditor's responsibilities, management's responsibilities, and so forth. One thing to note here is that we follow rules when we do the audit. We follow generally accepted accounting principles, government auditing standards, and generally accepted auditing standards. So the most important thing to note in your financial statements here on your opinion is that it's an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. All that means is that there are no modifications to that language that's prescribed to us to use in your financial statement, in your auditor's opinion. You'll also see within the financial statements it refers to those other 2 opinions, that being an opinion on internal control and then the opinion for the single audit. So as I talked about, pages 4 through 8, that's your management's discussion and analysis. As again, as I said, that's required to be in your financial statements in accordance with GASB. And now we'll just touch on some of the numbers here. You'll see that there's $517,000 in cash and equivalents. All of those accounts have been reconciled and agreed to third-party documentation. There's $995,000 in accounts receivable. Of that $995,000, about $324,000 of that is for park lease and terminal rents, and $671,000 of that is state DOT or Tiger grants. Now, you'll also see here there's this grants receivable of about $6 million. Since the harbor deepening project has been abandoned, what we decided to do was record that as a receivable from the Army Corps of Engineers. And then you'll also note on the next page that there's going to be a payable to state DOT for that same amount. Since that was picked up in revenue in previous years, there's also an expense to take that out of equity. So then the next item to note here, the compensating balance last year, there's a requirement on the compensating balance account. Last year there wasn't enough in there, as you'll recall. This year there's $353,000 in that. So that's above the requirement there. And then moving on here, there's $499,000 held in the debt service reserve, $99 million in capital assets. Within that, there's $11.8 million in additions for the bridge painting project, about $104,000 for vehicles and equipment, $1.5 million for the MALSIF, and then $169,000 for drainage and terminal improvements. Within that, there's the $6 million that was previously recorded as construction in progress for that harbor deepening project. So that came out again, like I said, this year, and is recorded as a receivable. Now, the deferred outflows of resources for pensions, that's about $1.9 million compared last year to $1.3 million. And then $148,000 in deferred outflows of resources for your OPEP. Moving on to page 10 here, there's about $7.1 million in accounts payable and accrued expenses. Within that, again, is that $6 million. That's that payable that's due back to the state DOT. The other item to note here, the Paycheck Protection Program, $365,000 last year. That's not there this year. That's been forgiven and recorded as grant revenue. And then moving on here, just to note some of the more notable items within your financial statements. The next thing here is this net pension liability, the proportionate share. Last year, there was about $1.6 million that was recorded as your portion of the state's liability for the ERS. This year, it's about $7,300. So what you'll note further down here in deferred inflows of resources, the pension last year, that was $35,000. This year, it's $2.1 million. So essentially what happens with these, with the pension is it's likened to a timing difference. So they're taking that $1.6 million and it's actuarially determined and moving that off to the future. So most of that $1.6 million is being recorded in your deferred inflows, with the remainder being pushed through the income statement. So moving on down here to your net position here, net investment in capital assets, $69 million, a restricted net position of about $1 million, and then there's an unrestricted deficit of about $2 million. Now on to page 11 on the statements of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position. The most notable items here, bridge tolls increased about $303,000. There was a significant increase in bridge traffic, nowhere near where it was pre-pandemic, but some of the return is being made there. Port operating fees decreased about $770,000 due to the activity at the marine terminal. I think there was a wind turbine project that was taking place last year, and of course this year we didn't see that. Expenses here. Salaries expense decreased about $330,000. There were fewer employees this year. We noted that. Payroll taxes and related expenses decreased about $648,000. That's where some of that GASB 68 or your ERS liability is being pushed through there on your income statement, like I talked about earlier. Professional fees decreased about $328,000. As you'll recall, last year there was an agreement with strategic development specialists. We didn't see that this year. And special handling equipment expense decreased about $498,000. Again, that has to do with the decrease in the activity at the terminal. And then on page 12, moving on to the non-operating income or expenses. Federal and state grants increased about $673,000. We noted that's the Tiger grant was a continuing project this year. That's where that's recorded. And then again, that $6 million being recorded as a return of state DOT funds. On the next page, on page 13, the statement of cash flows, it's going to show how you got from $717,000 in cash down to $517,000 in cash. That's $284,000 in net cash used in operating activities, $1.6 million used in capital financing activities, and then $1.7 million cash provided by investing activities. Then on page 15 through 39, that's going to be the notes to your financial statements. There's really no new additions to the notes to the financial statements here. Note 1 just discusses the organization. Note 2 discusses this, provides a summary of the significant accounting policies that the organization follows. Note 3 talks about cash and investments. One thing to note here, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is the FDIC amounts covered of your cash investments, and we'll talk about a finding at the end of the financial statements here. Note 4 just provides a summary of your capital assets. Note 5 talks about some donated property. There's nothing new there. Note 6 gives a detail of the construction in progress. Note 7 discusses the lines of credit that the organization has available. Note 8 talks about that long-term debt that's due to the state of New York. And then moving on here, note 8C talks about the bonds payable for the airport. And 8D talks about the various notes payable. Note 8E, the lease purchase agreement, that should be over in the coming period. And then note 8F provides a detail of the debt maturities over the next 5 years with the associated interest. Note 9 talks about the pension plan. You'll see in note 9 on page 30, it's going to show where those deferred inflows of resources and deferred outflows of resources. You'll see how you went from $35,000 to the $2.1 million. And most of that, like I said, is kind of a timing difference. That's that $2.1 million net difference between projected and actual earnings on your plan investments, or the state's plans and plan investments, rather. Note 9 runs on for a few pages. Note 10 talks about the post-employment benefits other than pensions. Note 11 talks about that restricted net position, that $1 million that's restricted for the compensating balance requirement, the bond payment reserve, and the debt service reserve. Note 12 talks about operating leases. Note 14 talks about some contingencies. Note 15 discusses that payroll protection program loan and the subsequent forgiveness of that loan. Note 16 talks about the CARES Act grants. Note 17, the Tiger grant. And note 18, probably the most important note in the financial statements, discusses the fiscal viability of the organization. And then moving on here, pages 41, 42 through, I'm sorry, 40, 41, 42, that's required supplementary information. That has to do with the OPEB liability and those ERS, the pension liability. Those are required to be in your financial statements. Note 40, page 43 and 44, that's that independent auditor's report on internal control. One thing to note in here on page 44 at the top there, there's a finding 2022-01, and we'll refer to that here. It'll be a few pages later here. On pages 45 through 47, that's the single audit opinion. Page 48, this is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. There was a total of about $12.9 million in federal awards that the authority expended. Page 49 is some required notes to your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Page 50, a few things to note here. The major federal programs for the highway planning and construction, that's that Tiger grant for the painting of the bridge, and the airport improvement program. Those were both major federal programs this year. You'll also note here that the authority is not a low-risk auditee, and there's a footnote here down at the bottom. And the reason for that is to be considered a low-risk auditee, we need to perform a single audit every year. Well, in 2020, there weren't enough federal funds expended to reach that $750,000 threshold. Therefore, a single audit wasn't performed. And so that requires the organization to be considered not low risk. And then page 51, it talks about, this is the finding, general municipal law requires the authority to have collateral for all of its funds that exceed the FDIC limits within the financial institution. And at year end, there were some balances within those financial institutions that exceeded that $250,000 limit. So that's where that finding comes from. One thing to note here, you're going to see at the bottom of your financial statements that there's not a response to this. There's a requirement that we submit with your single audit. When we submit it to the single audit clearinghouse, that we have to submit management's written response. So once we receive that, we'll complete these financial statements and get that filed. So with that, are there any questions for me?
We are responding on the monies, the uncollateralized monies over $250,000.
Yes.
Yes.
What did I have?
Is the solution for that issue fairly straightforward?
We have to have the $499,000 in M&T.
Mhm.
It's not collateralized.
And I wonder whether you would just explain that, because I want to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding what it means to have the funds collateralized
The FDIC insures
up to 250.
$250,000.
Right.
Anything over that is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
So in essence, it's not collateralized by the institution that's holding the money.
Can the institution buy coverage to collateralize that?
That's one thing we have to talk to the institutions about.
I'm sure it's not, I'm sure that it's at cost to somebody and that
Mhm.
probably the cost would come back to.
Back to us.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sure. But at least you thought about it and you're formulating a plan.
Right.
Okay.
So we have to put that response Kent sent me this morning, that it has to be on our letterhead and the items that we have to address.
Okay. Ken, on page 4,
Yes.
when it lists the holdings,
Yes.
the 5th bullet, Commerce Park Campus, Heavy Industrial Park, Foreign Trade Zone, is not 110, it's 118.
That's on me.
118. I'll make sure that gets in.
Thank you. And, I'm glad within the audit, you pointed out the fact that the amount of decrease we've had in traffic over the bridge due to COVID, completely out of our control. And I think you make that pretty clear throughout the audit report. And not that anybody who reads this will not understand that. It's just good that it's there multiple times, because a lot of that, again, there was nothing we could do about it. It's just one of those unique things that we hope never happens again. And yet I think overall, the job that has been done by staff in regards to the lack of traffic we've had across the bridge and the reduction in air traffic here, has played a great deal into our financial situation. So thank you for pointing that out. Chris, anything else?
No, really, the presentation covered the things that I had questions about that I didn't understand, and I appreciate it.
Well, good.
Anyone else have any questions? Megan?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, Sam.
Tony?
No, I agree with Chris. The presentation kind of covered everything for me, so thank you.
Yeah. I'm assuming Nicole's no longer on. I hope she's doing her homework. Okay, no other questions? In that case, is there a motion to accept the audit report?
I'll make that
So
motion.
moved.
Motion
Okay, I'll second.
made and Seconded by Tony. Any discussion? Not, Anne Marie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Whitten,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Ken, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you,
Great.
Kent. We'll be,
Great, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ken. Take care.
Okay, is there any concluding comments from board members or authority staff? Andrew, you have any questions?
He's no longer on the line.
I just want the front end.
Must have gave him a. Actually, there's nothing else on the agenda. However, there is a need for executive session to discuss a contract with a corporation. Should be relatively quick. If everyone could hang on. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Okay. We're out of executive session, go back into open session, and then we gotta get Megan out of here.
Yeah.
We're back? Okay. Okay, it is, what, 4:56 PM, coming out of executive session. Mr. Lawrence, any business to be conducted?
No, Mr. Chairman.
In light of that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
So moved.
move.
Made
Second.
and seconded? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 We stand adjourned. Thank you, and we'll see everybody on Friday.
Thank you. You got it. See ya.